I wanted to just remind that when people think about getting into the world of freight brokering, and if you're a carrier and you've gone out and got your authority, but your brokerage authority, but you haven't utilized it yet, I think that you've had some great conversations with DIY Semi, because he's probably the person I would say that you could attest the most to, because DIY Semi has his carrier and he's activated his brokerage in the past year. He can tell you firsthand what I'm about to say is that being a broker from the outside, the simplistic version of a broker is you call a shipper, they're willing to work with you, you get them some credit, they give you a load, you book the truck moves, you generate the invoice, you pay the carrier, you get paid by the customer, the transaction's done. That sounds really simple. Getting the customer is the first hurdles. It can take, if you have no direct customers and you've never cold called customers and you have, you're just, it's going to be completely new to you. Give yourself 4 months, 3 to 4 months before you secure that first load, on average. Not saying it's not going to happen sooner. It could happen sooner, but your first hurdle is that 3 to 4 months filling that sales pipeline. Okay, and when you're as a broker, like if you're a carrier and you have a broker authority, I've talked a little bit about this to you, Steve, is that you have to pick how you're choosing your brokerage to run. Are you going customer driven, mode driven, or lane driven? And you're going to say, well, what's the difference? Well, what would that matter? It matters huge. Because if you're focused on customer driven, which is what I do, I find a customer that has freight to move. I can accommodate that customer from one pallet going from Florida to Whitehorse, Yukon. And I can say that same customer, I can move a truckload, and I can move intermodal rail, I can move dangerous goods. But that requires a whole lot of training, skill, knowledge, and insight. Mode driven says, if you're calling customers, you have to go in with like a horse with blinders. If all you want is dry van freight, if they call and say, we do flatbed business, great, thanks for your time, have a nice day, and you move on to your next one. If all you want is dry van freight, that's mode driven. If you want flatbed only, same thing, you call a shipper. Yeah, we do 80% of our business is dry van and 20% is flatbed. Okay, I'm interested in your flatbed business. But they might say, well, we want a broker that can do both. Or they want someone, they've had some struggles. That's the mode driven. And then there's lane driven, where you are focusing on a certain lane. And this ties back to, if you go back to some of Steve's old videos that I've been on, ties in, the lane model can tie into what we call the Chicago model of freight brokering. The Chicago model is as follows. You find a customer from point A to point B, let's say from Chicago to Houston, Texas. And most brokers, because what's the question that James Best, Steve, has asked and said numerous times again, asking that broker, do you have loads outbound from that state to the next place? And that's what the Chicago model does. The Chicago model will take their salespeople and saying, hey, we now have 5 customers running these certain lanes, going from point A to point B. So what we're going to do is, instead of going out to find new alternative customers, we want new customers, but we want to find customers that have freight in Texas, going back somewhere close to Chicago. Because now, if we've taken the time to do this, we can offer our carriers that round trip experience. So it's a more difficult process, because you have to go in again with blinders. Because if you call a shipper in Houston and they don't go back to the Midwest, they're only going to Florida, you might take their information if you have a big enough sales team. But if you're a small brokerage and you're trying to create this back and forth business, you have to choose how you want to manage that. So it takes a lot more time to do this, but you can do it if you're persistent. So those 3 levels there. And getting the customer is that first hurdle. Once you fill your pipeline, then after that, the customer relationship side is a big piece, but it's the details. How you manage these loads and manage it with your carriers is really going to be finding out the appropriate details. All this stuff takes so much time and effort at the beginning to have this process, and so that you can then repeat it with new customers. And that's the difference. Like, I'm sure you can tell, when you get brokers that give you good instructions versus bad, and all the good pickup numbers, good appointment times, delivery times, all of this. All that takes time. So the whole point is, don't underestimate the process of being a good freight brokerage, because it takes a lot of time.
Yep, I agree 100%. Hey, this is Snorelord. Thanks for watching this clip from one of my live feeds. If you don't mind, hit the thumbs up, subscribe, and we try to go live and we try to do some recorded videos. And hit the thumbs up, and it helps the algorithms. It helps the YouTube, Google gods. So thanks for watching.